often say, well, now I had to acknowledge that I don't use web at a recording. I don't use WebEx very often, so I'm trying to figure out how I can see everybody that's joining in. So, but welcome. We're going to get started in a couple minutes. We'll let our working group folks make their way into the room. And then Department of Energy folks, I'm going to ask you to help determine when we're close to critical mass. But welcome. Hello, Elaine. Welcome. Welcome, John. Good to see you. Get started just here in a minute. We're just waiting for other work group members to make their way in. So why don't we give another 60 seconds on Edith, are you actually the first? Are you going to talk first? I forgot her. Lauren? Lauren, thank you. Welcome, Sarah. Hey, Sylvia.
Hi, Ben. Nice to see you.
It's a pleasure. Been a while.
Yes, it has indeed.
Okay, well, welcome everyone to Environmental Justice and Equity Working Group. We'll do some introductions here shortly, but to get us started, I'm going to pass it to Lauren, and she'll provide some opening remarks.
And good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you all here today. I'm Lauren Rosenstein. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the Community Equity and Inclusion Analyst for the Oregon Department of Energy, nested in the Strategic Engagement team. I'm going to be behind the scenes today, moving the slides along. So you won't really see much or hear much from me beyond this, but I'll be in listening mode. Before we get started, I wanted to root us in our mission. The Oregon Department of Energy helps Oregonians make informed decisions and maintain a resilient and affordable energy system. We advance solutions to shape an equitable, clean energy transition, protect the environment and public health, and responsibly balance energy needs and impacts for current and future generations. And now for this technical piece, welcome to WebEx. This slide shows you the myriad ways that you can access everything. Please notice that the chat function is in the bottom right corner. If it's possible for you to be on camera today, I do encourage that. If you've got any technical issues that come up, please let us know in the chat. If that doesn't work, you can raise your hand and we'll help you figure it out. If you're on the phone today, you're going to use *3 to both raise and lower your hand. And with that, I'm excited for a really robust conversation today, and I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Edith.
Thanks, Lauren. I don't see the slides switching very quickly. I think it's my connection. So, oh, there it is. Okay. So, hey, everybody. My name's Edith Bayer. I am the Energy Policy Team Lead over here at the Oregon Department of Energy, and I'm leading the overall work on the energy strategy. And I just wanted to pause for a second to talk briefly before I hand it over to Ben about the kind of the purpose of this working group. So as you all have probably heard by now, we have 8 working groups focusing on different areas of focus for the energy strategy. And this group is going to really serve for us to hear priorities for environmental justice and equity and how we account for it, and in the Oregon energy strategy. And as part of that, we also are really interested in talking through some opportunities to evaluate equity and environmental justice effects of different pathways to meeting our clean energy objectives. So we have some analytical tools that we'd like to present to you and kind of co-create how those might shape up together. And we're looking for your expertise and feedback and really value what you all bring to the table today. I also just want to note this little italicized piece here at the bottom of the slide that right now we're in a phase where we're defining the technical analysis for the energy strategy. A lot of that focuses around modeling our energy system and modeling out different ways that we can meet our climate and energy policy objectives. Starting early next year, we're going to jump into policy discussions, and that's where we'll really dig into the how, kind of how do we do this stuff. Whereas right now, we're focusing more on the what, like what are our options to get us there? What mix of technologies, what mix of measures, what mix of kind of demand side efficiency and other things, and supply side measures and technologies can we rely on to meet our goals? So that's really just my quick overview so that we all are roughly on the same page. And I will hand it over to Ben to give a more full welcome and introduction into the discussion today. Thanks a lot.
Great, thank you, Edith. Well, good afternoon, folks. So Ben Duncan, he, him pronouns with Kearns and West, and I'll be supporting facilitation as we go through our process together. We're brought on to work with Department of Energy, really to help ensure that we have productive, constructive conversations, but also to represent a third-party, objective, and neutral facilitator as we go through the process and engage in discussion and deliberation. And in order to set a grounding for productive, constructive, we offer some group agreements as we enter these spaces. And these, likely for many, if not all of you, are familiar, some version of these and the work that you all do every day. And we make these as an ask and as a hope, as an expectation for how we engage with each other both today and as we go through our process. So one that, I recognize this is an EJ and equity working group. You all, but you all are not one mind. So we do ask that as you have conversations and give valuable input to the Department of Energy and to the consultant teams working in this arena, that you're listening to each other, that you're trying to act with curiosity to understand each other's perspectives, that we maintain a level of respect and candor, but all in service of construction, right? To move the work forward, to give input that will be valuable, not just for Department of Energy and consultant teams as we move forward, but ultimately to the communities that you all are a part of and service to and representing in this space. And, again, keep an open mind, asking questions, clarification, again, maintaining curiosity as we do our work together. We ask that you're open and transparent, that you're inclusive, and that shows up in a lot of different ways, that you hold yourself accountable, not just to these group agreements, but accountable to the voices, communities, experiences, impacts of the folks that you represent in this room. Some of this feels redundant, and it's by intention, right? That we want you to respect differing opinions and not make any assumption that one view of a community perspective or a different view of a community perspective has less or more value, but really respecting that y'all are coming from different spaces and places. To the extent that this working group can identify and seek out common ground and operate in good faith to try to seek a path where you all do resolve difference and identify common vision, it's incredibly valuable, and it's really helpful for our Department of Energy folks and our consultant teams where you all find consensus. And of course, it's important to identify where you don't. And then just for all of you, I tend to be a talker, but I ask folks, if you're the first one to raise your hand every single time, I'm going to ask you to just take a breath, maybe step back. If you're someone who doesn't always find their way into the conversation, I'm going to ask you, don't get into that anxiety space, but your growth zone, as I say. But really, part of my job is to ensure that we do hear from everyone in the room. So I'll just preemptively say, if I'm not hearing from you, if we haven't heard from you, I might call you into the space, ask if you'd like to share. So I'll just encourage folks to push yourself into the space. And if you're one who's kind of, the first to raise your hand, maybe, take a beat, allow some others to come in, but really want to make sure that we get the expertise and wisdom from everyone in the room. So I'll ask that, we all kind of follow this direction as a way to ensure that we have a space that everyone can contribute fully. We go to the next slide. And we're going to move through quite a bit today. But part of, maybe we'll get to the next slide. I'm like Edith, maybe it's, I'm not seeing it moving. But as we spend our time today with our agenda, we're going to create some space for introductions. So we'll introduce the teams that are supporting this work and provide some space for you all to engage a bit with each other. Some of that relational foundational work that hopefully will help us actualize those group agreements as you all kind of see commonalities and differences in terms of how you're coming into the room. We'll create some space really briefly to really set some foundation of the work more broadly. And then we'll have the bulk of our time in a presentation and discussion with a number of folks that will introduce themselves here, but starting to think about the type of communities and households that are impacted by, and we should be centering in our conversations. We'll be thinking about air quality and public health and those intersections as it relates to energy, and then some important conversations around the geospatial mapping, where some decisions and opportunities exist that we'll be having conversations around. And then we'll wrap up, get you out of here, and talk about how we'll move into our next conversation. So any questions about what we're trying to do today? Okay, not seeing any. Let's go to the next slide. So we're going to flash the list of folks. God, this really is the delay, but I'm giving you a preview of what's coming. There it is. So you should see yourself on there, or at least see your organization if you're filling in for someone else. And we just wanted to show, right, there's the depth and breadth of expertise that's in the room, the wisdom that's coming into this space. You all, don't represent every voice in Oregon, but some really critical and important perspectives that will help shape the work that's coming forward. So we're gonna give you all a chance to introduce yourself in more detail in just a couple minutes. But before we do that, if we can go to the next slide. Who's going to introduce the CETI?
That'll be
team?
me,
Is that
Ben.
everybody? Yes, jump in.
That's it. Yeah.
Thanks,
Hello,
Ruby.
everyone. There it is. My name is Ruby Moore Bloom. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a research analyst at the Clean Energy Transition Institute, or CETI. And I'm up there in project management at the COP, along with our executive director, Eileen, who is joining us on the call. And then we have a technical modeling team, which is includes their technical project lead, Jeremy Hargraves, who is here, and you'll hear from him in a little bit. Elaine Hart of Moment Energy Insights is also on the call. And then there's some additional support from Evolved as well. And then for equity support, we have Mariah Caballero, who is also going to be here, and you'll hear from her, and Angela Long of Rockcrest Consulting as well. So big team, and really happy to be here. Great to see some familiar faces and to meet the rest of you. Thanks, Ben.
So just really quickly, so folks please mute if you're not talking. I don't know, maybe it was just me in my head, I'm hearing things, but it sounded like there's some background noise. So please mute if you're not talking, so we can avoid distractions. I think you hit what you were going to hit, Ruby, right? Good. Okay. Well, let's keep going. We're going to move into. Actually, before we do this, Edith and Odo team, do you all want to? We didn't create a slide for you, did we? Do you want to introduce your team?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we can say a few words. So Lauren and I have introduced ourselves. I feel like Lauren, I just want to give Lauren more credit than maybe she took here in just pulling all of this together. She's really helped. I know behind the scenes, she's been chatting with a number of you and just trying to pull together a great agenda. So thank you, Lauren. And I just feel like I had to say that because you might not say it yourself. And we're also joined here by Jessica Rikers, who is the manager of the technology and policy team here at Odo. Alan Zelenka, God, Alan, I'm going to butcher your title if I have to do it on the fly. He manages, or he's the
Assistant Director for Planning and Innovation.
Assistant, yes, thank you. Assistant Director for Planning and Innovation. I always get tripped up on assistant, associate. And am I missing anybody? I think that probably is enough for this call. We have a pretty big team supporting the work on the energy strategy across all the working groups.
Thanks, Edith. I saw Alan's face right in the middle of my screen, so I figured, we should at least sing his praises a little bit. And Jessica, I know you're on my next screen over, so thank you for that. So let's move into our next slide. We're gonna just begin with some introductions from you all, and we have a couple ways that we're gonna do this. So first, and Lauren, did you want to describe this? You want me to describe it?
I'm happy to have you describe it so that I can focus on my toggling between screens.
Perfect. We'll let you
Thank you.
toggle and I will describe. So hopefully this is not something new for you all, but it's some software, menti.com. I guess it's a website, some technology used. So there's two ways to access this. You can use a QR code, or you can go to menti.com, and when you pull that up, it'll ask you for a code 73158888. So I'm going to kind of look to folks and let me know, give me a nod or something that lets me know like you are in the Menti. And I'm already seeing, obviously, folks are doing it because we're starting to see the word cloud happen. So again, you can click on the QR code, or you can go to menti.com and put in the, I think the code that's on top of there is different than the code that was in the slide. Right? Just making a note.
Oh, sorry about that. I think you're right. Use the one that's on top of this slide.
On this slide. So if you're in it, menti.com, and then the code, when it asks you a code, is 69783413. Or you can take out your phone and go to the QR code. Or you can raise your hand if you need technical assistance. Lisa?
Okay, let me get to the screen one more time and just say the code again because I entered the old one. Hold on 1 second. Okay.
Put it in
Yep,
the
so
chat too. In
the
case.
code is 69783413.
Yep. Thank you.
So we could take as long as we want. You add your 3 words. How the word cloud works is that the more a word is put in, the larger it gets. So I'm seeing justice leading the way. I'm seeing also thrivability, community together, real solutions, understanding, electrification, ambitious, collaboration, perspective, just energy transition, rural, opportunity, we care. Give another minute or so for folks to put in their 3 words. Maybe another 30 seconds since it's not moving anymore. So we do this for a couple of reasons. One, because I just love watching these things move around when they come in, and it's a really cool exercise. But I also just want folks to just pause for a second and look at the words. Think about kind of how your colleagues are entering this space. And think about, as we start our work together, where you see alignment, where you see some solidarity, folks that use similar words that you did, etc. So again, just sit with what you see on your screen. Thank you, folks, for participating. And so now, building off that, thank you, Lauren, for good toggling there. Now we're actually going to do a round of introductions. So I'm going to ask, we'll pull up a slide that gives you some introduction guidance. If you could state your name, if you'd like to share your pronouns, that's always helpful for your colleagues and for your facilitator. Your affiliation, however you define that. Geographic location, that either where you're at or where your organization represents, if not statewide, or you can name statewide. And then a little bit more about one of the words that you added to the word cloud. So giving that image a little bit of life as we have our conversation together. So if it's okay, I'm going to work my way through our list, try to get it all right. But on my list, last name starting with an A, Miss Lisa Arkin. Love to start with you. So name, affiliation, pronoun if you want to share it, geographic location, and a little bit more about one of the words that you added.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Lisa Arkin here, she, her pronouns, and I'm with Beyond Toxics. We're based in Eugene, but we do work and partner with groups statewide. And so, as an environmental justice organization, I put in words such as equity and justice. And I chose those words because in the work that we do, we really see this glaring disparity between folks who have the means to do more to address climate risks and folks who don't have that capacity for whatever reason, whether it's income, socio status, location, language, whatever it is. And so I'm all about making sure that we lift everybody up as we move toward this transition to a clean energy future and to a just energy future.
Right. Thank you, Lisa, and good modeling of how to respond. Appreciate that. So we're going to go to, I guess, the order of my screen. Even though I did start with an A last name, we'll start with an A first name. Alessandra, can bring you in.
Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Alessandra de la Torre. People call me Ale. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with the Northwest Energy Coalition. So we work in all 4 Northwest states, and I specifically work more in Oregon and Washington. Location, I'm based in Medford, Oregon, so Southern Oregon. And I chose, one of the words I chose was mindful. I think I kind of resonate also with the real solutions word as well. Just thinking about how we impact people, thinking about how we impact our future generations. You know, our energy systems also use water, and we also want them to be affordable and reduce burden on folks, and also reduce our consumption in energy. So I think mindful just sticks with me because I would want it for us to be people first, environment first, and think about the future generations and how we impact them as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Alma, please.
Yeah, hi, my name is Alma Pinto. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a policy associate with NWEC, so I work with Ale, and I'm based in Portland, but the majority of my work is focused in Oregon, and one of the words that I put in is meaningful in engagement, and I chose that word because I really want this working group to not just be a, you know, check the box type working group, because the reality is that like the equity part of this work should be in all of the working groups. And so I really want to make sure that the work that we're doing here gets spread out. So yeah.
Right, thank you, Alma. You got a couple of clappy hands, a heart. Appreciate that. And we'll come back to that in terms of your relationship to the work of the other working groups. So I just appreciate you naming it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. Christina, please.
I'm Christina Zamora. I'm with Klamath and Lake Community Action Services. We provide anti-poverty programs in Klamath and Lake counties. One of the words that I chose was collaboration. So rural areas always have limited resources. None of us can solve a problem or find a solution by ourselves. So I'm super into collaboration. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. Elaine.
Hey there, Elaine Hart. I'm an independent consultant based in Portland. I'm on the consulting team here, so I didn't put a word on the word cloud. But if I did, it would be active listening for myself today. Thank you.
Good. You already caught me screwing up, Elaine, but I appreciate you just rolling with it. I'll just going in the order of my screen. Jess.
Hey everyone, Jess Grady Benson, she, her, or they, them pronouns. Apologies, my internet is not incredible today, so let me know if I'm breaking up for you. I'm with Rogue Climate, I'm the organizing director, and we work in the Rogue Valley and on the South Coast, and I'm based in Portland and support both regions. One of the words that I put in was real solutions, because there are so many technologies and possibilities that exist as we look at a transition away from fossil fuels, but not all of them will be just or equitable for our communities. And so ensuring that the solutions that we invest in most deeply are not replicating the harms of the fossil fuel industry and the extractive economy that got us this place is why I'm here. Appreciate you all.
Thank you, Jess. I really appreciate all the hearts that flash out while y'all are talking. It's a good EJ and equity group. John, jump in.
Thanks. Yeah, John Sang here. I use he, him pronouns. I'm policy manager with Spark Northwest, working on state level advocacy across Oregon and Washington. Really nice to see some familiar faces here and some new ones as well. And thank you for, including me in Spark Northwest in this group. I put justice and just transition in there, and then also care. And my reason for adding care is because I think when we get to the root of this work, for me, it's about our care for our common environment and for one another. And I think even when we're getting into really technical work, which we're going to be doing here, it's really, really important to keep that as a grounding. So that's what I added. That's what keeps me motivated. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Caleb?
Hey everybody, Caleb Lay. I use he, him pronouns. I am calling in from beautiful Medical Springs today, way out in Union County. And appropriately, one of the words I threw in was also rural. Because we do a lot of work with rural communities, and a lot like Jess said earlier, in this energy transition, one of the things that I find myself really concerned about is the replication of the same harms, like sacrifice zones, that we've seen for so long. And I think a lot of those words that folks threw up, like inclusion, meaningful involvement, those are critical, especially right now in these working groups developing the state energy strategy. Meaningful involvement needs to be of everyone, especially the people who are going to be affected by this state energy strategy. The ratepayers, the people who are downwind of the power plants, the factories, the people who live on transportation corridors. So excited to be here and excited to be included with so many people who are doing incredible and important work.
Yeah, thank you, Caleb. Nikita.
Hi everyone, my name is Nikita Daryanani. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Climate and Energy Policy Manager at the Coalition of Communities of Color based in Portland. I picked the word accessibility, and I'm thinking of this in several different ways. Accessible decision and policy making, so accessible to specifically the people that are impacted by environmental policy and climate change specifically, and ensuring that these frontline communities have access to clean and affordable energy, and that we don't leave low income and communities of color behind as we transition to clean energy, but seize this opportunity to increase and expand access and accessibility to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikita. Robert, I think you might have popped in before we gave directions, but just name, pronouns if you'd like to share them, affiliation, geography, or where you're coming from or representing. And we had shared 3 words that reflected what brought you here. So just pick a great word that you want to reflect on and bring it into the room. Welcome, Robert.
Yeah. Hey, thank you. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Robert Wallace. I'm with WIST RC&D. We're based in the Dalles, Oregon, and we really work throughout the state. Most of our projects are in the state of Oregon. and with a focus on the rural communities. We traditionally have worked a lot with the rural electric co-ops, with Energy Trust of Oregon, rural development. We've worked a lot with the irrigators, and so kind of the water energy nexus that's out there and stuff. But we've also worked with a lot of the rural small businesses. And so I was here and put the words in. So 2 words that I'd put in was rural and collaborate. And those are, has already been talked about, you know, definite key things that we have to do. Sometimes rural living is tough living. And as you guys know, we've had a lot of fires already this year, and power outages, and resiliency is a big piece for us too. And so, but yeah, we you know, really looking to try to help bring a rural perspective, but also with the different priority communities that are out there, we definitely try to help the underserved folks that maybe not traditionally be involved in some of these programs, reaching out to those folks, try to look for opportunities on things that work for them. So anyways, yeah, thank you guys for having us.
Thanks, Robert. Sorry I didn't see you out there. You're not invisible to me. I just didn't catch you, so thank you. Sarah? Oh, we got 2 Sarahs.
Oh, whoops.
Sarah W., you go first.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Hey, all. My name is Sarah Walkley. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the policy associate with Oregon CUB, which is Citizens Utility Board. We represent residential ratepayers across the state of Oregon, but our office is in Portland, and I am in Northeast Portland. Oh, one of my words. Okay, I picked thrivability, which I don't even know if it's a word, but it is today. I think a lot of times in this work, we're often having to fight against what we don't want. And so just thinking, in my own work, have been trying to center more of what we really do want. And I really want to help contribute to building futures where people can thrive, not just survive, and have more than they even need to share. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to ground myself in these days. So happy to be here. Thanks for having us, and happy to be with all the amazing folks I get to work with, and some new ones. Looking forward to meeting all the new folks too.
Awesome, thank you, Sarah. And everybody's got to use thrivability in a sentence. We're gonna actualize that today. So thank you for bringing it in. Let's go to Sarah Giles.
Yeah, can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you.
Cool. My name is Sarah Joels. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the summer intern at the Multnomah County Office of Sustainability. A lot of words. So my full title, I'm the Energy, Climate, and Equity intern, but I'm very new to the energy space. So the word I chose was curiosity, because I'm approaching everything just like a sponge, learning as much as I can. And I'm also, curious to know what this working group is about and what it really means. So nice to meet y'all.
Okay, thanks for helping me learn how to pronounce your name, Joels, not Giles. Okay, thank you. Sylvia, stick with the Multnomah County.
Hi everyone, I'm Sylvia Tanner. I use she, her pronouns, and I have the pleasure of working with Sarah at Multnomah County Office of Sustainability. And I'm located in Northeast Portland. And let's see. And I think I did all the words except the word that I used on my one of the words I used in the Menti was just energy transition. And I think to me, it encompasses a lot of what we talked about. You know, you could get to clean energy, to get to have 100% clean a number of ways. And some of those ways can cause a lot of harm. And some of those ways can leave a lot of benefits on the table for impacted communities, for communities that have usually just kind of looked at energy transitions from the sidelines, often getting saddled with externalities and getting like no participation in the benefits. And to me, a successful energy strategy for Oregon does not do that. A successful energy strategy for Oregon considers all the ways in which that transition can be just. And so, you know, that includes procedural considerations, benefits and allocation considerations, and others. So I'm really happy to be here. This has been really cool already. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you, Sylvia. Greer, if I'm pronouncing that correct.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you.
Awesome. My name is Greer Klepacki. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the Policy and Advocacy Manager for Community Energy Project. We serve several counties in Oregon. I'm coming to y'all from Northeast Portland in the North Tabor neighborhood. And the word that I put in the Mentee was creating connection. I think, similar to some other folks on this call, I'm a little bit newer to this space, so I'm really excited to kind of make new connections with people and new organizations, and be able to be a part of Community Energy Project and the amazing work that we do. So I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Garrett. Noah.
Hi, everybody. Noah Scott with Uvalde Cree. We work in the eastern side of Oregon. One of the words that I put in was understand, to understand the ideas that everybody's gonna put out there, and to keep an open mind to all of them, and then also to understand the impacts, that we're having on the environment and how we can make those impacts positive.
Great, thank you. John. Madalena, maybe? Hope I didn't butcher that.
Yes, no, it's fine. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you, John.
Hey, John Madalena, he, him pronouns. I'm the Energy Program Manager for Self Enhancement, Inc. I didn't have a chance to put in a word, but if I did, it would be community. Just because so often the people impacted the most by these types of conversations and decisions are usually the most left out. So just really trying to come at this with that kind of mindset to make sure it's a full perspective that we're giving. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. Mark. Mark Healy.
Hello, Mark Healy. I work as a contractor for the Coquille Indian Tribe, and I'm on their Climate Resilience Task Force. And in the cloud, I put we survive together, and I think together is the main word. And I think this is going to be an unprecedented collaboration to take on climate resilience. And if we're not all part of the solution, we're not going to make it. So, main word.
Right. Thank you, Mark. Who do we best? Nick? Did I get some to you, Nick Caleb?
Hey folks, Nick Caleb, he, him pronouns. I work at Breach Collective. We have offices in Eugene and Portland. And I've also done a substantial amount of work in the Klamath Basin, my hometown, on energy issues in the past. So I'm excited to see folks from that community represented here as well. I chose ambitious as my word. And the reason I chose that is that I'm a veteran, I guess, of state planning and rulemaking processes at this point. Been on 6 or 7 of them in the last decade, and we've been able to find a remarkable amount of unity around recommendations from community and environmental justice organizations in that time, and I've rarely seen those recommendations actually get put into final reports or adopted. And so I'm kind of setting the intention and hoping it catches on that we want to be as ambitious as possible in our state energy planning right now. So thanks. I'm excited to be in space with all of you.
Great, thank you, Nick. Appreciate you putting that in the universe. We have call-in user number 5. I don't know if that's who is that on the phone?
I think that might be Sarah, who is a part of our team, who's not able to join via computer today, but she's our community navigator. Very lovely human.
Okay, well, she'll forever be known as call-in user 5, at least for tonight. Did I miss any of our working group members?
I think Ani might, oh, yeah, I was gonna say, I think Ani might be on the phone.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Anaísa Gómez Rodriguez. I'm with Verde. I'm the Energy Justice Coordinator, and I use she, her pronouns. I just jumped in, so I'm not quite sure if there was a prompt, but judging by what was said the last 2 people, the reason I'm here is because I want to ensure that this process is equitable and our communities are represented. And that's why I'm really eager to be part of this work group.
Right, you did a good job. Where are you located? What geography?
Yes, I am in Portland, Oregon. Currently, I live out in outer southeast Portland. So it's the little part of Portland that everybody forgets exists. So, yeah.
Well, we won't forget. Appreciate it. Did I miss anybody on the working group? Great. Well, I appreciate everyone sharing. It's really is a wonderful exercise to go from the visual representation of the words you put, and then just you all just giving it so much life and so much love to bring those words and give them some action and some meaning. So I appreciate everyone sharing. And with that, Edith, I'm going to pass it to you. We're going to move into a bit of some grounding and background, and then we'll move into a substantive conversation as a group. So Edith, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Ben. And thanks, everybody. I really enjoyed just listening to everyone. And I felt like I probably owe people my 3 words since we asked everybody else to give them, even though I didn't fill them to the cloud because we wanted to hear from you all. But I'll say that I'm here to listen, to understand, and to incorporate ideas and perspectives. And I think that's a big goal for this meeting. So I just want to, if we can go to the next slide, this is a slide that you all may have seen. We've presented it a couple of times, once in the kickoff meeting for the working groups. And the slide is changing, but I can just speak to it while we wait for it to come up. So right now we're in phase 1 of the project, as I mentioned before. I think it's important just at the start to pause and to remember the kind of total shape of the project. So right now we're talking about the technical approach. And then early next year, what comes out of the technical approach is going to inform policy discussions. And I think where a lot of people are coming from, because it's kind of the practical side, the how are we going to do it, that piece falls within the policy recommendation discussions. And what we're talking about now and what we're trying to shape is kind of the what, like what, there was a comment about what technologies get us there. And so that's kind of what we're focusing on now. And I also just want to, remind everyone of the timeline. So we're going from now until fall of next year, November 1st, 2025 is when the energy strategy is due. We've layered in a bunch of different engagement kind of structures to inform each of these steps. So the technical approach is highlighted in orange, and then the process that's there is kind of repeated when we'll get to the policy recommendations. So we had a couple of public listening sessions last week, and those were really to hear just from anybody who joined on kind of what their thoughts and priorities are relating to energy, where they're coming from, what kinds of things they'd like to see in an energy strategy. We have these working groups, and I'll just say a few more words about how the working groups slot in a moment, but I'll just run through just so you can see the full picture. We have an advisory group. The advisory group is composed of 29 people, and it's really a diverse group representing different perspectives from around the state. I would say it's a microcosm in a way of the state, and it's a group that we're sort of meeting with about once a month, and we're reporting to them on progress and asking for their feedback to inform the strategy as we go along. We also have an interagency group that meets regularly, and that group is for coordination on everything from policy to data. And this is not an Oregon Department of Energy strategy. It's an Oregon energy strategy. It's important for us as a state agency to be working with our sister agencies. We are also consulting with the 9 federally recognized tribes in Oregon, and that's an ongoing part of the engagement as well. We've also chosen to kind of highlight here engagement with environmental justice and equity focused groups, because that's just an area that we think is important to single out and to highlight because of the importance of the perspectives and the information that you all bring to the conversation. And then we have some webinars kind of sprinkled throughout as well. So that's just to give you a really high level idea. Just a few more words on the working groups. I don't want to bombard you all with process because I want to get to the interesting part of the conversation. But as I was saying at the beginning, the purpose of the working groups overall is to inform the analysis that we're conducting for the energy strategy. And there was a really good comment on the importance of all of the working groups addressing EJ and equity, and we have that in mind. So we are having a second meeting on August 15th with you all. And at that meeting, we'll be bringing what we've heard in the other working groups and talking through that. And so I hope that that's an opportunity to kind of connect up some of those dots that that were brought up in the introductions today. And you know, there's a lot of topical overlap between the groups. And so that's also why we here are having a second meeting. And then on August 22nd, there'll be a meeting where we bring all the working groups together. And that's to reflect back what we've heard and to present our recommendation for where we've landed on the scenarios that we will be modeling and some of the key questions that have come up in the different working groups. You know, this meeting is really going to be focused on some very key pieces of the analysis that we'll be looking to get your input into. What are we going to do with that information? We're going to take it on, see what we can incorporate into the analysis. Some things might end up being more kind of easier to fit in a policy discussion than in the analysis. It depends a little bit on what fits within the analytical framework and what doesn't. And we're going to document kind of what we've heard and how we've responded. And finally, maybe we'll just go to the next slide and I'll talk just a little bit about the scope of the energy strategy, just as kind of a reminder to lead into the discussion on what the bill, House Bill 3630, asks us to do and what it asks the Oregon Department of Energy to take into account at minimum in developing the strategy. So on the right is sort of the full list put into boxes. It's a list directly from the bill. And essentially on the left is sort of the roll up of the themes that come out of that longer list. So we'll be looking at energy demand, and energy supply and infrastructure. We'll be looking at energy resources and different technologies. We'll be considering environmental justice and community benefits, affordability. We'll be looking at existing incentives. And when we get into the policy discussion, we can talk more about what incentives are bringing us and what more might be needed. We'll be talking about social and economic impact, resiliency and security. So all of these issues are really important, and one of the challenges that we have is to see what we can incorporate in the technical analysis and then what we do with that when we get into the policy discussions. So I'm going to pause here just to see if there are any questions. This is just kind of a high-level overview, the grounding. We're going to get into the more exciting piece in a moment, but I'll pause to see if there are any clarifying questions on any of the content in these two slides.
Good. Thanks, Sita. So just as a reminder for folks, there's a little hand at the bottom of your screen if you want to raise your hand, or you come off mute. I'll try to see you if you want to ask a question. I'll just pause.
Ben, I have a question. This is Lisa Arkin.
Yeah, Lisa, jump in.
Oh, just might be helpful for those of us who are also tracking the climate protection program that's on the jurisdiction of the DEQ, like how these two strategies mesh up or don't match up. You know, some of the goals are the same in terms of like community benefits and things like that.
So is that you, Edith, CPP and this kind of work, or?
I might at a high level say how it's connected, and I'm looking to Alan to see if Alan might be able to fill in more details. When we say that we're modeling to meet at Oregon's energy policy objectives, the CPP is one of those objectives. So the others are HB 2021, 100% clean electricity for our largest electricity investor-owned utilities, and the third is the Executive Order 2004, which calls for an 80% economy-wide emissions reductions by 2050. So the CPP is one of the, I would say, the anchor policies that we're modeling compliance with, meaning that the combination of technologies that we I'll say it differently. We have to meet that climate target, and the model is going to help us figure out the how we can do that, taking into account cost, taking into account some specific considerations. and we're assuming that we know that that's in rulemaking, we're following the rulemaking and are assuming that that's going to be in place. So that's just something that we're building in. Alan, I don't know if you can speak to the timeline for the CPP and our timeline and kind of more detailed considerations, which are part of Lisa's question.
Yeah, the CPP is in public, the final draft rules are in public comment right now. And I think they close at the end of August, beginning of September. And then they go into a final rulemaking where the EQC will adopt them, and they're supposed to adopt them by the beginning of December. So we're assuming that they will do that and they'll be adopted as proposed. And we'll see those reductions. Embedded in the CPP are a whole bunch of other regulations that contribute to helping Oregon meet the CPP requirements of reductions in fossil fuel emissions, like Advanced Clean Cars 2, where we have to have 100% of new car sales by 2035 being EVs, and the Clean Fuels Program and Advanced Clean Trucks and the CAFE emission standards all contribute to the reduction in emissions and the better use of energy because of under the umbrella of the CPP. And then likewise for HB 2021, there's a whole slew of utility programs that or incentives that will occur to get us to install new renewable energy to get to that 100% by 2040 of our portfolio from the electric generation for the investor-owned utilities, PG and PB&L, are from renewable or clean power generation.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's
Hopefully
already existing one.
Yeah, hopefully that's helpful, Lisa. Nikita?
Thank you.
Yeah, I was wondering, besides I know that there are written feedback periods for folks to provide comment. Are there other ways that groups who are not part of the work groups can weigh in or share thoughts and feedback? I know that I think you mentioned that there have been some public listening sessions. How is the feedback that's been gathered in those sessions considered for the energy strategy, and will that be presented to this work group if it's related to equity or environmental justice?
Thanks, Nikita, for those questions. So yeah, it's a really good question. The listening sessions, I think it's a good idea to bring back what we heard to this group in the next meeting. So I think that we can put that on the agenda in addition to what we've heard from the other working groups. So that was one way that folks could engage. Anybody can join any of the working groups, anybody can listen in to any of the working groups. The working groups are set, but that's another way to engage. So and all of these meetings will be recorded, and we're also accepting kind of on a rolling basis comments on an online comments portal that we have, and somebody can drop a note there. So if someone's not a member of a working group, doesn't have time to be there live, they could still listen and still prepare some comments. So we're trying to kind of keep it as open as possible while making sure that the working groups move forward. So for this part of the process, those are the main opportunities. The advisory group meetings are also open, so anybody can listen in to hear how that conversation unfolds, and can also send comments to those kind of following those meetings, referring to those meetings, however folks want to write up comments, it's up to you. And I'll just, so those are the opportunities for input, and I'll say that we'll be organizing a webinar to reflect back more broadly kind of where we've landed after we've presented our kind of proposal to the working groups and then the advisory group, and then we'll have a webinar so that, again, we're trying to make sure that we catch everybody that we can. So I hope that's helpful.
Awesome, thank you. So let's then, Greer, you had a question in the chat. So Edith, do you want to just remind the different bill numbers? Those HB 2021.
Yes, the bill is 3630. That's the bill that directs the Oregon Department of Energy to develop an energy strategy.
Perfect.
I think that's what the question might have been getting at.
Yes, so the 3630 in 2021. Thank you. Okay.
And HB 2021 is the 100% renewables by 2040 law.
Yep, awesome. Good questions
Which was
for
in
reference.
2021.
Perfect. Okay, well, let's keep moving so we can get in. And if folks have other questions that emerge, throw them in the chat, and we have folks from Department of Energy who can try to respond. But I'm going to pass it to Ruby and really move us into the kind of substantive part of our conversation.
Great, thank you, Ben. You can go to the next slide, Lauren. Apologies for the background noise earlier. Hopefully it's quieter now. So yeah, as Edith mentioned, we're going to talk about 3 different analyses that the CETI team is proposing. One of them is the energy wallet analysis. The second one is air quality modeling, and both of those Jeremy will talk through because they're directly related to the energy pathways modeling that his team is doing. And then third is a geospatial mapping analysis, and that will be Mariah. But after each one of these, we'll pause, we can take clarifying questions, and then we have some discussion questions and prompts for you all. And I forget if this has been stated already, but we're going to be posing questions right now. If you don't have feedback right now on the spot, we also would love to hear from you in the week up to the next meeting, during the next meeting, and even after that. So don't feel like you need to respond right away. Moving to the next slide and handing it over to Jeremy to talk through this first energy wallet analysis. Jeremy, I see your mouth moving, but we cannot hear you.
Is that better?
Yes.
That's better.
Perfect.
There you are.
All right, so the purpose of the energy wallet analysis here is to look at how the costs of energy might change over time for customers across Oregon. And the energy costs that a customer faces, it's not just electricity, it's a broad spectrum of electricity and fuels. So gasoline at the pump, natural gas in home heating, maybe fuel oil or propane. And so there's a variety of ways that customers are spending money on energy. And these are going to change depending on the type of transition that we're modeling in each of the scenarios. So for example, in our reference scenario, we have quite a high level of electrification, and that's supported by policy in the state. And the electricity bill component of what customers are spending on energy it will increase in that situation. But at the same time, they're displacing the need for fuels of other types. So they're going to be spending less on gasoline if they have an electric vehicle. If they're transitioning into heat pumps, then they will be spending less on natural gas. And so this is exploring that whole basket of energy spending. How is that changing? And looking at across different types of customer in the state, what might the impacts look like depending on particular customer circumstances. And that includes both the types of investments that they might make, depending if they belong to a particular socioeconomic group, or if they are a rural customer or an urban customer, and also looking at what the impact on energy burden is for that customer as well. So we look at this in a little bit more detail. We'll go to the next slide. There it goes. So what's shown on the right-hand side of this slide are examples of this analysis done in a previous study from Evolved that was done in Wisconsin. And so on the top chart there, it's showing the estimated energy expenditures by household, and this is for an average customer. So in the baseline case, this is kind of business as usual. We're still using fossil fuels, and our energy spending stays relatively consistent between 2020 and 2050. If we look at some of the cases where we're going to large amounts of electrification, like the net zero economy-wide case there, we're spending a lot more on electricity, which are the blue colors, but the gasoline demand and natural gas is decreasing pretty significantly. So we can look at the change overall in energy spending. And this is not looking at the rates that customers are paying. So over the next 30 years, the rates, the components of those rates, even the structure of those rates is probably going to change pretty significantly. Those rates will change to serve the particular type of energy systems that we have in the future, and those are going to change pretty dramatically. And so what we're doing here is looking at the cost of providing the energy to the customer. So the cost of the upstream infrastructure investments and the operations of those, the costs of the transport of different forms of energy but via transmission line or pipeline, the cost of delivering that to the customer. And we're applying the changes in those costs to the energy expenditures that customers see today under current rate structure, to give us an estimate of how they would change over time. And then the other factor here is that customers may be spending or investing in different clean energy technologies in different years, depending on what their circumstances are. So take, for example, electric vehicle. Electric vehicles are an expensive upfront capital expenditure, and some customers may be limited in what they can afford and the year at which they could transition to an electric vehicle. And so we will be factoring in the year in which customers invest in different technologies. And that's shown on the bottom chart there. The example is for the electric vehicle. And we have investments in EVs in 2022, 2025, 2030 through 2050. And the example in Wisconsin shows that if you're buying an electric vehicle in 2022, your costs are going up pretty significantly. The electric vehicle costs were high in 2022 relative to the alternative. And so the customers that are investing in those have income to spare to be putting towards a choice like that. The 2030 year is pretty much the sweet spot there. That's when costs are lowest for a customer, because EVs, the costs have declined for those vehicles. And if you're investing in an EV in 2040 or 2050, your costs are actually higher because you're retaining a lot of gasoline use. Now, this is an example for Wisconsin, so it's not going to be reflective of results that we see for Oregon, but we will do this kind of analysis across the scenarios that we run in the state energy strategy here. And we're going to be looking at this for up to 5 different customer types. So one will be the average customer, but then we have the opportunity to look at other types of customer across the state. So examples here include a metropolitan low-income or disadvantaged community customer, a rural low-income or disadvantaged community customer, and we have 5 of these customers to work with. So your input here in what would be most valuable to look at would be really useful to us. Next slide. And I'll pass it back to Ruby to talk through the discussion questions here.
Thank you, Jeremy. So here's our first pausing point. We can take some of those clarifying questions that I know Ben was tracking, but then also posing these questions to you all. The first one, as Jeremy mentioned, we're looking to define up to 5 different customer groups to do this energy wallet analysis with. And so we have some ideas for a few listed there, but very open to feedback from you all. Related to that, we're thinking about what Oregon-specific, ideally Oregon-specific data sources we might use to help define these customer groups in terms of understanding their annual energy use and energy bills. And then some considerations at the bottom. Would love to hear about questions or concerns around energy burden and affordability in general in Oregon, and what you would like the model to tell us about energy burden and what you're most interested in learning. And as Edith alluded to, some of what you're interested in learning, we may or may not be able to address through the modeling, but still really helpful input to get at this point. Some things will come up later in those policy discussions when we're talking about interpreting the results of the modeling.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. So John, let's start with you. I don't know if you had a question or a comment, and then Yeah, I don't know for Jeremy, Ruby, if it's just best to work from top down or if folks can go wherever they want, but John, let's start with you.
Thanks, Ben, and thank you, Jeremy. I just had a quick point about it was the first or second slide. It said that electrification causes electricity bills to increase, but something like bills for other fuels like gasoline at the pump will decrease. I think when I hear bill increase, my mind immediately jumps to like rate increases, which can be sort of like a lowercase t triggering term these days with electricity rates going up so quickly, especially in Portland. And I worried a little bit about that being taken out of context as a soundbite for folks saying that like electrification is going to make your bills go up. You know, like to me, I'm kind of like, maybe that's more percentage of your spending on energy skews towards electricity or something like that. So I don't know if I'm the only one who feels stuck on that point, but it stuck out to me.
Well, you got at least one thumbs up. So Jeremy, do you want to, there's some thumbs flying through the air here. Jeremy, you want to reflect back on kind of John's comment and perception?
Yeah, so I understand that sensitivity and we could work on how to phrase that. There is, as you mentioned, there's that difference between bills and rates, and so the bills are going to increase if you have more kilowatt hours that you're purchasing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that rates are increasing. And in fact, studies that have been done on electric vehicle adoption have often concluded that rates will go down just because you get better utilization of T&D infrastructure. And so those two things are not correlated. There are different factors affecting them. And so that's why I think when we talk about this, we want to be focused on the energy spending in total rather than to be highlighting any one component of that energy spending outside of the context of the whole.
Right. So let's
John, that's why we call it the energy wallet, which is the amount of money you spend on all your energies, as opposed to energy rates or electricity rates or gasoline rates or whatever, because it's about the total amount spent. So in the absence of any rate increases, if you shift from a gasoline powered ICE vehicle to an electric EV, your gasoline costs go down, your electricity costs go up. And so your wallet could be less though, because you're spending less on energy.
Yeah, that's John.
Yeah, thanks. That makes sense.
All right, thank you. So there's a couple, let's go a couple in the chat and then we have 3 hands up. So Jess was looking for some definition around average customer. And then Christina asked about non-investor owned utility customers and how they're included in the modeling. Do you see those, Jeremy?
Yeah. So the average customer isn't anything more complicated than just taking average energy from the number of households across the state and the energy being used. And so it isn't representing any one specific customer that we're trying to define as an average customer from their attributes, but it's just the average energy use. And so for that customer, we could use average income for an energy burden calculation, or we could just skip the energy burden calculation for the average customer and focus on the other 4 when we're doing the energy burden analysis.
Right.
And sorry, what was the second question?
The second one was how will non-investor owned utility customers be included in modeling?
So we in doing the modeling itself, we are not differentiating between IOU or non-IOU customers. It is just a kind of a physical representation of the infrastructure needed to serve the population. When we are looking at these specific up to 5 customers in this analysis, then we can take whatever customer groups we want to look at for it. And so your suggestions here would be really useful, because we could then use the specific bills that or rates that that customer faces. One of the challenges for us in this analysis is to characterize those customers with a set of bills, energy use, income, because that type of data is usually coming from anonymized utility data. And so we need to explore what sources we have available to characterize each one of these customers.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. So let's go Sylvia and then Sarah. And I don't know if you all are answering questions or asking questions, but I'm going to maybe try to push us to start answering some of the questions. But Sylvia and Sarah, jump in. Sylvia?
Yes, thank you, Ben, and thank you all for this work. So I have a question, unfortunately not answering the questions in the screen, but I heard earlier that, you know, or part of what we would get is this overall sense of how much it costs to serve customers, but that we would not be touching on rate structure issues or what actually people are going to be seeing in their bills. And I'm wondering if, since rates and how rates hit people are such an important part of, you know, energy justice and these questions of how people interact with the energy system, is there any way that this analysis help us draw some conclusions or make policy recommendations that are related to rate structures and rate design and you know, to ideal ways to approach this to help, you know, at least some subsets of customers be able to, you know, deal with energy and energy costs?
Yeah, thanks, Sylvia.
So this is looking out into the long term, thinking about how costs for customers are going to change. The appropriate framing for that is to look at costs and not the specific rates, but in the near term, the rates are the things that are driving the impact. And so that is something that we are not getting at with this particular analysis. But it just the large scale change that happens in electrifying the demand side, in moving to new forms of energy, electricity production and fuels, all of those things will have an impact on what type of rate structure best serves the customer, and particularly demand response and responsive loads. Those are things that under certain current rate structures just make them untenable going forward, because they're not designed to balance if you have loads that can respond to pricing. And so it is kind of a necessary component of a transition to be regularly doing rate design that serves us best in this future. And I think that would be one of the recommendations that comes out of an energy strategy. And it's not necessarily one that isn't covered already by utility rate making, just because utilities have to recover the costs, and those costs that they need to recover are kind of the thing that is coming into our analysis. So if we're showing lower costs over time, like we saw for the average customer in the Wisconsin analysis, that means that the total pie that the utility has to recover from rates is going down. So rates should be lower, but how those costs are recovered is dependent on how the utility does its rate making and how they treat the different criteria like equity that go into setting those rates. So it's not work that we could cover here, but it's definitely very pertinent work that comes as part of the transition down the road.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. So I'm going to interpret that as both a question and an answer. And Sylvia, I think also one of the responses to the considerations around questions and concerns around burden and affordability. Sarah W.
Hey, I want to preface this with like, I don't have like a modeling brain. So this is just like what I'm thinking when I look at this. And I feel like one thing that I'm wondering is, because you can't really separate energy efficiency, weatherization needs or not needs from energy affordability, then we get into things like single family, multifamily customers and the differences there. Like even if you're somebody that lives in like a mobile or manufactured home, you know, your energy efficiency needs and affordability needs are going to look a lot different. And so just I feel like your answer to Sylvia, I think, is probably the same answer to my question, but just it's hard for me to imagine how these customer groupings can like get to that, and also like considerations for each of these customers around like delineations between what kind of heat they have, even like if they have gas, electric, or something else. And then even just thinking about in the same similar consideration of single and multifamily residential customers, thinking about like renters versus homeowners and what affordability means and access to any of these investments that you're speaking of. Yeah, again, don't have modeling brain, but those are the things that are coming up for me.
I feel like few of us do, Sarah, but Jeremy, jump in.
So that I like the identification of the different customers there in your comment. That could well be useful input to us to identify which of these energy wallets we want to be looking at, because those are the things that are going to differentiate the types of investments that can be made. So if we're looking at customer in a mobile home, for example, then they may have less energy use overall because they have a smaller home, but they have worse insulation, and so they have heating needs commensurate with that. Maybe they're a rural customer, so they have higher vehicle miles traveled because they have to commute every day. So those are the types of factors that would define a unique sort of set of energy determinants for each one of these energy wallets that we look at, and how for that customer their energy bills might change over time. And so identifying which of these would be most interesting to look at would be valuable input here.
Yeah, that's helpful. So I'm seeing a couple pieces in the chat, right? So I think, John, you lifting up Sarah's comment around delineating renters versus homeowners, maybe type of home to your reflection back on mobile homes. I'm wondering for Sylvia, your comments, it's probably how you define metropolitan versus rural versus low income, right? There's probably some definitions that I don't know if that's a today conversation, Jeremy, or if that's maybe input that we might want to come back to folks, right? If you agree that we should be looking at income, this group can help define what that is, or how do you want to move through? And then we have a couple other hands. I want to come to Caleb, but is that a today conversation around like how you're defining some of these terms? Or do you want to speak to it at all, Jeremy?
So I think that there are the EPA definitions that we can use, but we don't need to be tied to those definitions. And so this group can have input on what they would like to define, and use for setting these different customers for the energy wallet analysis. So that there isn't something that's set in stone for what the definition looks like. It would be us taking on board what you think is most important to look at.
Great, thank you. So why don't we put a hold in that for now, because I think that might be an important conversation to come back to. Caleb, you have your hand up, and then Sarah, I'll come back to you. Caleb.
Thanks. Just quickly want to echo what other folks have been saying here. The first thing that's really concerning with me about these categories is that they look a little bit like, you know, monoliths within monoliths. Rural means something very different on the coast versus southeast or northeast Oregon. Climate-wise, temperature-wise, you know, weather-wise, not to mention the differences in wages. Like, you know, if you live over on the Oregon-Idaho border, minimum wage is different for you than if you live in the rest of the state or in the Portland metro area. There's a lot of variance there, and I feel like the more granular we can make this, the more useful it's going to be, and the fewer people are going to get left out in the cold, maybe literally, to make a terrible pun. But I will stop beating that dead horse for the moment. And I wanted to ask a quick clarifying question. to make sure that I understand this right. So the modeling that we're talking about here is essentially modeling the cost of all the infrastructure and everything that goes into getting to what is the wholesale price for the energy to the customer. Do I have that right?
Not so wholesale price would be the energy price at the grid scale level. This would include the delivery costs as well through the distribution system. But that's not going to match to what is the rate that a customer pays, just because there's an allocation that's happening in a revenue requirement model. And so the way that we would do that is we take their bill for 2024. So what are they paying today? And then we would use the change in the cost of providing energy to that customer to make the same change in that bill over time. So it'd be like we're locking in the structure that they're using to pay for their energy today, and then changing that commensurate with the change in meeting the customer's energy needs. So that's the way that we estimate the changes over time, accepting that we don't know how their rates will modify in the future.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that clarification, Jeremy. And I think that gets a little bit to my other concern here, which is is there a way and how are we going to account for the potential for corporate greed throughout this process? Just, I guess, something to raise and consider moving forward.
Name it. Jeremy, do you want to comment on whether the model can capture corporate greed? That's what I heard, Gail, but I assume the answer is no, that's not something we can model for. So Caleb, I'll accept that as a comment. Caleb, I did want to ask though as a follow-up, because I think your comment around, and there's some language pieces here, and I know we have a couple other sections too to get to today, but your comment around rural, like, is there a different, and John, there's a couple comments around subcategories. Can we only do 5? There's a couple comments in the chat. Do you have a name for that would differentiate rural coastal versus rural desert versus, right? Like, is there language that we've utilized as a state that really draws that distinction? Because there are myriad differences between both the lived and geographic experiences.
Thanks for bringing that up, Ben. That's a really good question, and nothing comes to mind that quite fits right. And I feel like that's part of why we run into these problems repeatedly. Developing something like that to account for the differences, maybe it's as simple as going county by county, or basin by basin, something like that. I'm not sure. And if somebody else has thoughts on that.
Well, we could hold it and if folks have ideas, we could throw it in the chat. Alessandra, you had asked about local small businesses, or is this really residential customers? So Jeremy, is that an easy? So does this include small business, or is this all residential customers?
It's residential customers, the way that we've set this up.
Okay.
Just because there's a large spectrum of difference on the commercial side. Type of business, building size. There is just a lot more heterogeneity on that side of things versus the residential customers.
Okay. And then 5 is the limit, up to 5. That's a budgeted modeling kind of, it's just yes, that's a yes or no, I think. 5 is the limit.
Yeah, at the moment, that's what we are budgeted to do.
Okay, and then subcategories within groups. So maybe this gets to a couple of the comments. So you could say metropolitan under 50,000, metropolitan over 100,000. Like, are there subcategories within these groups that would add up to the 5? Is that one way people could think about it?
Yeah, it would be as if we're looking at 5 different customers.
Great. Okay. So let's go to Sarah, and then I'm going to push y'all to say, like, focus in on what the questions are here. if you could throw your answers in the chat, you can bring it into the room because we have a couple other sections I want to make sure we get to. And I am going to look at my Odo staff. If I don't need to rush us through this, just tell me we can sit in this space and come back to it at our next meeting. But let's go to Sarah. And
Could I jump in really quickly, Ben? Sorry.
yes.
Just, it's kind of what you're saying, but in one of the next sections, in the mapping section, I think it will address some of these. Like, we can come back to this discussion once we have that context as well. So
Great.
we're not leaving it forever.
Okay. Thank you. That gives people hope that we're not just going to abandon them in their thoughts. Sarah, jump in.
Hey, thanks. Sorry, I turned my camera off because my internet's not being great right now.
Yeah, you're all right.
I am wondering, well, firstly, I have a question that is maybe also an answer. I'm not sure, but it seems like there's a lot of reliance in terms of transportation on, like, the transportation aspects of this modeling on the transition being to EVs. And I'm also just wondering, like, obviously folks here know there's lots of other less carbon intensive modes of transportation. And I'm just wondering how different mobilities will be taken into account for folks who walk more than not, or cycle, or take the bus, or any other mode of public transportation, and if there will be considerations in the different scenarios, assuming that public transportation and pedestrian micromobility friendly infrastructure will be expanded and electrified. So there's that, and then let's see, I'm looking at the slide. Oh, and then I just had a point about the data sources to consult to define customer groups. Investor-owned utilities in Oregon, almost all of them at this point, have conducted either a low income needs assessment or what's now more often being called an energy burden assessment. And utilities, so PGE, Pacific Power, Northwest Natural, they have hired a third-party contractor to do these really interesting analyses that are, you know, not, the data is not publicly accessible, but I wonder if it's possible that some of that information would get shared out. Obviously, that's not super inclusive information. It would only touch on the IOUs in Oregon, and it would, yeah, but just a thought there in terms of some data sources that exist out there, but I don't know what the limitations are with their contract and whatnot, but, and that's that.
So we can capture it as a potential data source, but Jeremy, you want to offer any reflection?
Yeah, thanks for that. That's useful, a useful avenue to pursue for us. On the public transport and alternative forms of transport side, so there are two ways that can come into the analysis. So one is in setting the scenarios for the modeling work itself. And there's opportunity for running a scenario where we're looking at lower vehicle miles traveled over time. And we are not explicitly modeling the impact of public transport or changes in zoning or more distributed or working from home or car sharing, those kind of policies, just because the cost of implementing those and the impact that they have on customer vehicle miles traveled is really hard to estimate. But we can run scenarios where we look at a certain percentage VMT reduction that would be the result of many of those policies and see what kind of benefit that brings Oregon in terms of reduced cost of meeting the targets in the future, potentially mitigated feasibility issues on building out the large scale infrastructure that's needed, and then also filtering into the air quality side of things as well. So that's one place. And then the other place would be in this energy wallet analysis, where we're defining different customers. These customers can have a vehicle miles traveled of anything that we want to set there that could be reflective of their particular circumstances.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm gonna move us, but folks, please continue to add to the chat. I assume Odo staff, you all can continue to capture what's coming in. There's some additional comments, but I want to make sure we at least get through the other couple topics, and then we can kind of decide how do we make sure we come back where we need to? So let's move, and you named air quality. Let's go to air quality. Jeremy, are you leading this section, right?
Yep.
And thank you for folks. Just keep throwing it in the chat. We'll capture some of those other data sources, other ideas for responses to the previous questions. Jeremy?
So a second analytical topic that's coming out of the modeling results is looking at the impact on air quality. And so what we have is the EPA COBRA model, which it's a meta model of the results that are coming out of a variety of air transport models, looking at where you're changing the emissions from point sources, non-point sources around the state. What kind of impact does that have on different types of air pollutants? So our models, Energy Pathways, RIO on this chart, we have changes in demand technology emissions, we have changes in emissions from supplying energy, and that's going into these air quality scenarios. And that's not just Oregon specific, but it's the states surrounding Oregon where when you're looking at freight transport and prevailing wind direction and so on, have also an impact on Oregon's air quality. And so that feeds into the EPA COBRA model, and we get changes in air quality. We get the estimated health outcomes from those changes based on a number of epidemiological studies that have been incorporated into COBRA, and then the economic benefits that translates into. So we move to the next slide. So this is a one example that comes from our Net Zero Northwest study that we did last year, and it looked at Idaho, Montana, Oregon, and Washington. This is one of many metrics, avoided deaths per million people, and we can see the difference between 2030 and 2050 for each one of these states, and also the low and high estimates. So the EPA COBRA model has these bounds on the low end and the high end of how these metrics might be impacted. So fewer mortalities is one of them. There's several others as well. Examples include fewer lost work days, fewer hospital admissions, economic benefits from being able to stay at work. And the results, so our modeling is being done for 2 zones in Oregon. We have an east zone and a west zone, and we'll be reporting this for these zones, but we actually have more geographic definition in the COBRA model than that. So we have the opportunity to be defining zones a bit differently to look at impacts across the state. So next slide. And I'll pass it back to Ruby.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. So posing a couple kind of open-ended questions here. One is, what are your biggest questions or concerns regarding air quality in Oregon? And the second is, what are you interested in understanding about the link between energy and air quality, thinking about the inclusion of air quality in this energy strategy?
Again, raise your hand, get in the queue, or come off mute and just get up in there. So looks like no concerns about air quality in Oregon amongst the group. Caleb, there you go. Thank you. And then we'll go to Sarah. Yeah. Appreciate
I'll go first into the fire here.
Yeah.
I guess my biggest concern is, I imagine, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I imagine it's a similar concern that a lot of folks here have, which is that the current inequities around air pollution will not be addressed through the energy transition. And I guess I don't know enough about this modeling right now to ask the right question, but I did have a question in our initial meeting about, how granularly, there we go again with the granular, but how granularly are we going to be able to model where different energy technologies are located and sited? Because I think one of the big risks through the energy transition is that the same fundamental problems will occur, right? We have a need for increased energy in one area, and so the path of least resistance, the path of least cost, is the route we end up going, which often has been siting a facility like a power plant or a transmission line or a transportation corridor through an already overburdened community. So I don't know that I have a question there. Again, I'm just sort of voicing my concerns. Sorry.
Yeah, but Jeremy, do you want to speak to that? Because I know, you know, the concept around overburden or cumulative impact, I imagine is on top of mind for folks. Do you want to speak to that interplay?
Yeah, so in terms of the way that the model is building out infrastructure, it is those two zones, east and west, and so it is not at a granular level to be able to say a facility is being built here or here and what the impact on population is. But that is also a kind of a useful outcome because number one, deciding where a plant is going to go is much more complicated than what we can do in a model that is looking out to 2050, because there are so many factors that go into it. There's all of the various siting and permitting concerns that should be incorporating the types of concern that you just identified. And so that's one element of it that we can't really be making determinations about where these plants are going to go at a very granular site level in this type of long-term energy planning analysis, because the work that needs to get done to actually site them is a many month long siting and permitting process that should incorporate many of these types of factors. And then the second thing is that because we are looking at this at a granular or non-granular level, then there's the opportunity for siting that same identified capacity of resource or transmission in multiple different locations across the zone. So we are building up our potential for being able to site renewable energy, for example, based on many layers of screening of granular sites. So those areas that legally you can't locate anything there, those sites that are of they have sensitive habitat, those sites that are culturally sensitive or have socioeconomic impacts. So those things are being factored into our potential in the first place, but then we are coming up with this granular or non-granular solution. So then going into this equity work, and particularly the work that Mariah is going to be talking about with the mapping, it gives us the opportunity to give some guidance through the energy strategy on what types of concerns should be incorporated into siting these resources.
Yeah, that's yeah, Caleb.
Just a very quick follow-up to that. Could you talk a little bit about how you're delineating east and west, or how you're defining east versus west geographically?
Yeah, so we haven't completed that delineation yet because it's dependent on transmission constraints, but transmission constraints are the driving factor there, that there is a limitation east-west over the Cascades on sending energy. And so making sure that we are capturing that constraint and the potential investments needed to mitigate it is part of the setup there on our geography.
But you're good, but that's more or less the response, right? Is the Cascades being the delineation between east and west, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Okay. Alessandra, I think you had your hand up, and then we'll go to Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. Just to answer the questions around some of the biggest concerns regarding air quality in Oregon, as I'm living through it right now with smoke all over in the air, just the effects of smoke for public health. There's also power outages and the purposeful power shutoffs that utilities conduct to try to mitigate wildfire, but these also happen when there's a lot of smoke outside, also very high temperatures. And so there's just a lack of sometimes people knowing what's going on, why the power is off, if it was purposeful, if it wasn't, when it'll be turned on, and the public health, both mentally, the stress of not knowing, as well as physically not being able to escape the smoke or the heat. And just, yeah, this lack of communication between the public and the utilities, and just the type of impacts that has on people. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Alessandra. I'm wondering, Lisa, you had a question in the chat, and then I'll come back to you, Sarah. Sorry. It was just a clarifying question. Does the public health modeling rely on pollution from energy production only, or from all pollution associated with climate warming? Parentheses, wildfire, smoke pollution, more air inversions, keeping industrial pollution trapped near sensitive sites, etc. So could you talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, so this is the impacts on health that result from the changes from a baseline. And so it's relative to what kind of air pollution or impacts on people's health would exist if we weren't making the transition to lower emissions and clean electricity. So what we would be reporting here are the savings in mortality and the fewer lost work days, etc., from the transition itself relative to that baseline. But in both cases, we would experience the same climate warming, and we would experience the same wildfire risk. And so that isn't in the results that be coming out of the COBRA analysis.
Good. And we can maybe share between meetings more information around the COBRA analysis, because I know wildfires continues to come up in the chat and folks' comments. Just having a deeper understanding of that might be helpful. Sarah, W?
I think similar to what Ali had said, when I think about air quality lately in Oregon, I'm thinking about extreme heat and just like the nexus of extreme heat and the lack of energy efficiency. And then also what it means for customers who are living in heat islands. So thinking about the nexus of heat islands and air quality, and identifying where in Oregon those zones are, I think would be important for a lot of reasons. Even thinking about things like, also similar to what Ali mentioned, but like disconnections for inability to pay, not just when not just when company is losing power because of an issue they're having or because they're doing a power safety shut off. So those are just some things that I think about.
And then, Jess, do you want to just say your question? Because it's again, it's kind of a follow-up around how the analysis is accounting for this relationship to health and transition.
Yeah, sure. And I appreciate all your work on this, everyone, but Jeremy, especially for fielding these questions today. I think what I was just trying to understand better is, for what I took from your response was that you're using the same predictions around climate impacts for both assessing the baseline and the transition. And if that's the case, and you're looking at air quality benefits over time, how are you in this analysis assessing or showing any benefits related to reducing or mitigating the worst potential climate impacts over time? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's also kind of a design choice in the study that I think that we have yet to decide upon, which is basically that Oregon's actions to reduce fossil fuel use and emissions really have no impact on the climate impacts in Oregon, just because that is a global action that will impact whether we see changes over time or not. And so the question would be, what do we assume about action that the rest of the world is taking? Are we assessing this in a kind of stasis of action across other countries and other states? Or do we assume that in one scenario, the rest of the world is taking no action, and in another case, they are taking action? And so that's kind of a design choice. And it also filters into, do we include any social cost of carbon? Because of the same reason, Oregon, the choices that Oregon make really has no impact on the components that are included in social cost of carbon and regarding the impacts of climate change on the environment. But you're raising an interesting question that I think we need to have a conversation about.
Yeah, thank you. And so I'm going to go to you, Alan, and I'm going to ask us to introduce at least the geospatial mapping conversation. Because I wish we had like 3 more hours together, but we don't. But Alan, jump in, and then I'm going to move us to geospatial, and we can always keep coming back.
I'll be real quick. So remember what the modeling is supposed to do. I think that's helpful here. So what we're doing is we're creating a reference scenario of how we meet our energy and climate goals. And then we're comparing it to different scenarios or different pathways to still meet there, but by a different pathway. And we're looking at the delta between the two. We're not trying to assess the overall impact of climate change on Oregon. We're trying to assess the differences in these different pathways to meet our objectives. So if you think about like that, and then think about that's even more constrained to just the energy impacts associated with on Oregon for each of those pathways, it constrains what we're thinking about, but that's what the model can do. The model can't solve for everything. So like, for instance, wildfire impacts clearly impact air quality and clearly impact disadvantaged communities. That's not a direct energy policy impact. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Alan. So yeah, we're gonna have to, a lot of stuff coming in the chat. Let's move to the geospatial mapping. I know we're running out of time, but I want to make sure we've at least introduced this to folks, because I think we might have to do some work between now and our next work group meeting. But is this, who's doing this? Mariah, is this you?
Yes. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Mariah. I'm a 5th-year PhD student at Vanderbilt University, and I work with CETI as well. I'm originally from rural Eastern Washington, so this is a lot of fun for me. This is the geospatial mapping component, and these are just a variety of indicators that I've sort of collected and aggregated into a spatial data set just as a draft. I was taking both the community benefits from this project and the EJ definition that Oregon put out as well. And I sort of took all of these different options from several different public data sources and aggregated them into a single data set. We don't quite have enough time, but I do have it all in like one long Microsoft Word document. So I'd be happy to share it out with folks if you're interested in that. It goes through like where I got the source and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm happy to share that out. Next slide. The current drafted approach identifies 47 justice-related variables for all 992 census tracts in Oregon, and it goes from 2018 to 2020. And some of those data sources included things from the US EPA, the US DOT, a lot of variables from the US Census Bureau, data from the US DOE, as well as from the CDC as well. My goal is really to use a replicable approach with open source data, and it's all coded in RStudio so that it could be posted to GitHub, so that something like this could be updated with time using new data sets. One thing that's really important to me is that for example, the USDA Rural Urban Commuting Area Codes, RUCA, those are currently published from 2010 and won't be updated until fall of 2024. So things like that, where we'd like to keep sort of updating this database so that it is most reflective of communities and their needs. And something I think that's valuable about this approach too is that we can develop Oregon-specific indicators at the community level. So we can identify communities with the most pressing needs in the state for potential policy implementation. Next slide, please. These are just a couple of the example maps. So somebody mentioned mobile homes, and I totally understand that that's a really important aspect of this, especially as it relates to energy burden. So this is an example map using that data set, and it's called the bivariate map, where you can actually show two sort of relationships between the variables. So in this instance, the like neon green is showing high instances of energy burden, but low instances of percentage of mobile homes. The sort of bluish, I guess, in the right corner is showing low energy burden, but high percentages of mobile homes. And then right where the two are sort of coexisting at really high instances together are this dark green, right? So you're seeing communities in the upper quartile for both energy burden and percentage of mobile homes. And like I said, this is an example static map. In this case, there are 161 census tracts in the 75th percentile for both energy burden. For Oregon, that's more than 5% of energy burden, and the percentage of households living in mobile homes. Again, for Oregon, that's greater than 12%, 12.7% of families living in mobile homes. And to me, I think this represents tracts that, or communities that could be prioritized for equitable home and energy investments, right? So ideally, we'd be sort of understanding where communities' needs are and sort of offering that up for folks too. The data sources for this was the US DOE LEAD tool and the ACS 5-year estimates. Next slide. This is another example of a map. It is showing the relationship map between the percentage of households prioritized for the Inflation Reduction Act incentive households, meaning they are at 0 to 80% of area median income. Someone mentioned the real importance of folks that are sort of above that 80% AMI right in the middle. That's actually an option too. It's in the data set if folks are interested in that. And again, it's also showing percent home ownership. So again, this sort of neon green would represent high percentage of a home ownership and low percentage of homes that are meeting or that are prioritized for the Inflation Reduction Act. The blue would represent a high number of homes that are eligible for IRA incentives, but a low percentage of home ownership, and the green would be where the two are really converging. And in this instance, 20 census tracts are in the 75th percentile for both home ownership, meaning that more than 79% of households in the community own their home, as well as homes that are prioritized for IRA incentives, meaning that 81% of households in a community meet the AMI income eligibility requirements for the greatest IRA incentives. And again, this could be an example of like prioritizing communities that are really eligible for those incentives. And like I said, there are about 47 variables that I've collected, right? So we can mix and match and really think through some of these things like we're talking about. And I'm happy to talk through like how all of these variables were defined and created. Again, happy to share out that document and even the code and data sources that were used to collect them all. And I will stop talking because I know we have to wrap up, but that is my piece. And I'm happy to take, questions.
Yeah, so can we go to the next slide? So help me out, team. We're at 3:55. So there's a lot of stuff in the chat. And Jessica, thank you for your tracking and just naming that there'll be an ongoing effort to be responding to questions that are emerging. I know there's also a lot of contribution in the chat that I think the CETI team can kind of sit with and try to plug into the questions that we've been asking today. Since we only have a few minutes, I guess I'm going to look to my Odo colleagues here and CETI colleagues, and I guess I'm looking to the group too, because there's a lot of questions that have gone kind of unanswered or only partially answered. So I'm wondering, maybe by a show of hands or thumbs ups or something, are folks willing to, if we send this materials out, willing to kind of provide responses? Odo, and SETI, is that a good mechanism to get input back between now and the 16th? Because I know we have a whole other set of topics that we're going to want to utilize. So I'm going to look, Edith, I'm going to look to you. Jeremy, Mariah, Ruby, Edith, let's start with you around how do we want to, there's a lot of stuff that we didn't get to today, and I want to make sure that you all are getting what you need.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So I think there's a lot of complexity in here, and so I think I would like to share this document with folks on this call. I realize that there's some time involved in looking through it. I think it would be time well spent because it would really help us prioritize what we can show and what we can kind of hold up against what we're getting out of the other modeling for the energy strategy and help inform policy discussions when we get into those. So I think that this is a pretty important piece of the picture, and we can dedicate some time in the next meeting to discussing it. And I think your suggestion, Ben, on written comments, I'm interested to hear what our CETI colleagues think, but I think written comments would be helpful to the extent that they help us start to understand what floats to the top, since like in any big process like this, it's important to try to, I'm thinking back to the word cloud, and there were some words like actionable, and I'm trying to think of, things like what's practical, what's actionable, what's most informative, what are the top priorities, how do we get at those? And this might be one way to do it. I don't know, what do Mariah and others, what do you think?
I'm personally like more than open to getting written feedback, right? I'm always open to like new data sources and things. So if folks are willing to take the time to review it and provide comments, I'm more than happy to think about how to integrate it in.
I think I have a clarifying question, Mariah, that I just thought of that might be helpful for folks, which is, are we choosing what we would show and how? Like of the 40, however many you said, like what are we asking folks to tell us, right? Like what you showed us some of the capabilities, but are we talking about potentially publishing 40 pages of maps? That might be a bit much. Are we talking about understanding where the most important kind of overlays are to consider? What will be most constructive?
Yeah, I guess maybe if there were specific relationships that folks were really interested in showing, right, because it relates to policy, that might be something really valuable, right? So if there were certain variable pairings that they might prioritize over others, that would be an option. If there is a different visual map that you feel might be more effective, I'm more than open to thinking through that too. Is that helpful?
It is for me. And I realize that we're at time here, so I'm just going to talk about the next steps briefly and just say that we really appreciate everybody's time and how active this group has been. There are a lot of comments we haven't gotten to. We're going to be reviewing all of those and thinking about how we can kind of constructively continue the conversation in the next meeting. We'll send out Mariah's document. Very interested in folks' feedback on that you can, whatever you can provide in advance of the next meeting, or even come prepared to speak to in the next meeting. In the next meeting, we're also going to reserve time to talk about what we heard in the other working groups and in the listening sessions. I think that's also an important feedback loop. It gets a little bit away from what we talked about today and towards the modeling of the energy system and kind of what the vision is shaping up to look like there. There have been some specific equity and environmental justice related comments that have come up that we want to bring to the group. And there's also, so there's the time for the next meeting. Sorry, I misspoke earlier. It's the 16th at the beginning of our meeting. I misspoke. And we'll be sending around an agenda for that meeting soon. So have I missed anything that anybody wants to supplement?
Just Sylvia had a question in the chat. Just do you want to talk about, it's a compressed timeline. We're moving really quickly in alignment with the modeling, but do you want to just speak to that, Edith, before we close?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't see the full comment because I have too many.
It just says, I will just ask my process question in the chat. Is there a reason to have the work group process in such a compressed timeline?
Yeah, and Ben, I mean, you kind of said it. It has to do with the budget and resources and timing that we have to work within. And so we have to have the modeling ready to inform the policy discussions, and the modeling takes a few months. And so we need to get that the inputs into the model in shape. I think that there is a little bit more wiggle room on some of these other areas. I think it's something that maybe we can speak to more specifically in the next meeting, because the compressed timeline is really for the main model of the energy system and the different scenarios, whereas some of what we talked about today has a little bit more flexibility. And so we can consider how we can deepen that conversation a bit, because we don't quite have the same restrictions as we do on the energy systems models. I hope that's helpful. And we'll prepare to be able to speak to that more specifically in the next meeting on the timing and what we might be able to do.
Great. Well, thank you. So we might give you all a little bit of homework, but hopefully it's happy homework because it's contributing to such a ambitious and visionary set of work. So appreciate folks. I thank you for the extra 2 minutes. Edith, any last words, or we just say thank you? We'll see you on the 16th. Much love, all that.
Just to say, I really invite folks who have the capacity to listen into the other working groups, because I think that's also really valuable. The more folks, have an opportunity to listen to what's in there and reflect back, that's great. But otherwise, just looking forward to seeing you all next week. Thanks.
Appreciate it. And then for next time, Ramphis, I thought I saw you in the attendees. We'll make sure everybody gets their webinar link so you get it on as a participant. I just noticed that, but with that, we'll close out. There's some resources here. We'll share materials. Appreciate everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care. And just for Odo, folks, if you're still here, I gotta run to do some other, I won't be able to debrief with you, so just let you know. But Lauren, maybe I'll follow up with you and send some thoughts if you have them, folks. Okay? All right. Good job, everybody.